Okay, so this is a slightly different video compared to the rest of my Overanalyzing Naruto series, because usually those videos are going episode by episode and I overanalyze it that way, but instead of doing that, I'm instead going to be overanalyzing a part of Naruto, more specifically the Sound Ninja 4, or 5, we'll get into that later. And given that in the actual Overanalyzing series, they all have officially died, this might be the perfect time to make this video. I'm going to be going into the group as a whole, then get into the characters involved in the group. Those of course being Jirobo, Kidomaru, Tayuya, Sakon and Ukon. I won't be talking about Kidomaru in this video, mainly so this video isn't bloated as hell, but also cause I want to make a dedicated video overanalyzing him as a character. And yeah, enough yap. Enjoy the video. Or don't, that's up to you. Let's start off with the Sound Ninja 4 as a group. The name, Sound Ninja 4, obviously refers to the fact that there's 4 of them, but technically there's 5, cause Sakon and Ukon are 2 people in 1. So all that talk about the Sound Ninja 4 is wrong. Objectively speaking, it is 5. And with Kidomaru, it would technically be 6. In the anime, they were given a backstory in how they were formed, which was essentially that they fought in like a battle royale type of thing. And they were the strongest, so they were then appointed as Orochimaru's bodyguards. This is anime only, however, so it's not actually canon, but it's something that's relatively harmless to the story that adds depth to these characters. It's kind of like Kidomaru's backstory in that sense, something that was shown in depth in the anime, but only something said, or rather alluded to, in the manga. Their outfits are all the same, except for Sakon and Ukon, who are obviously the leaders and thus get a different way to distinguish themselves. Their outfits still bear the same meaning though. They all have the yin and yang symbol at the bottom, but instead of a yin, it instead has 2 yangs. This makes the symbol instead look like a white snake, which is the snake heavily associated with Orochimaru. It also shows lack of balance, cause, you know, that's what yin and yang's all about. And if they're imbalanced, that can, if you try hard enough, allude to being corrupt, as it shows actively avoiding balance, which can be seen as avoiding virtue. The purpose of the Sound Ninja 5, on paper, is to be Orochimaru's bodyguards, but the better way to describe their purpose in the story is to be his most reliable pawns. This is backed by the fact that Orochimaru didn't really seem to care at all that they die, and also cause he seemed to give them missions he wouldn't trust with Sound Ninja like Dosu, Zaku, and Kin. The 2 times they're canonically shown in the anime is during the Konoha Crush and during obviously the Sasuke recovery mission. Their mission in the Sasuke recovery arc is pretty straightforward and shown in detail. They go to the Leaf, convince Sasuke that Orochimaru is his only option. They then give him the Awakening Pill, giving Sasuke stage 2 curse mark in the process. Then they escort him over to Orochimaru. During the Konoha Crush, however, their job is fairly glossed over. Their job was to act as the Kazekage's bodyguards during the 3rd stage of the Chunin exam, then attack the Hokage's bodyguards and create a 4-sided barrier trapping Hiruzen and Orochimaru. They actually have a pretty good success rate on their missions, given the small sample size, but they succeed in very Sound Ninja 5 ways. For example, in the Konoha Crush, they succeed in their mission to put up the barrier, but the mission was still technically a failure in Orochimaru's eyes because he ended up losing all his jutsu. For the Sasuke recovery mission, they succeed in everything they were supposed to. They convinced Sasuke to leave, gave him drugs, then got him to Orochimaru, but they also fucking died in the process. The only other time they're shown to have another conflict that you maybe could count on their win record is when they were reanimated during the war arc, but that was just a fun piece of filler during the war arc, and I don't think it's really fair to add it. They were kinda destined to lose that one, cause production couldn't kill anyone off important during filler. Anyways, something we don't see but I want to theorize is how they would potentially work together. The only other thing we would have to point us in some sort of direction is during episode 111, when Genma and Raito jump them shortly after leaving the village. In that little encounter, we see Sakon and Ukon along with Tayuya fight Genma. Then Jirobo and Kidomaru fight Raito, which funnily enough means that Raito got worked by them twice. These pairings would point to them usually using their partners in this fight to coordinate attacks. So like Tayuya and Sakon and Ukon would usually attack together, and Kidomaru and Jirobo would usually attack together. I imagine Sakon and Ukon's attack with Tayuya would look something like this. Tayuya uses Genjutsu to make sure the enemy doesn't move. Then Sakon and Ukon use Do-Re-Mi, their taijutsu on their opponent. Jirobo and Kidomaru's attacks would look similar. Kidomaru would trap them with his goop, then Jirobo's chud ass would hit them. Obviously, because there's a lack of information though, we can only really theorize, but that's my theory. Anyways, that's really all there is for the group as a whole. So now it's time to get into the goofballs that make it. Jirobo, let's start off with him, I guess. You know, considering he gets slimed out first. Jirobo's name means second son or younger brother, which reflects how he's treated within the Sound Ninja 5. They often berate him and see him as the punching bag of the group, which is one of the reasons he bullies Choji during their fight. He does that as a way to project his own problems, and I mean, look how well that turned out for him. Jirobo is also the name of a Daitengu in Japanese mythology, which are known to be large, powerful demon spirits. Something that's not only shown in, well, his size, but also his power. Jirobo is from the South Gate, which actually connects to something kinda cool, but I'll talk about it after we get into where the other Sound Ninja are from. His purpose as one of Orochimaru's bodyguards is a little hard to pinpoint given we only see him fight alone, something that'll be somewhat of a running theme for the rest of this video. But given his jutsu and the pairings I talked about earlier, I can only theorize that he's used as a first line of offense and second line of defense. The databook ranks him as a 23.5 overall, making him the weakest out of any of the Sound Ninja 5 by a whole point, but still almost 10 higher than the lowest overall Sound Ninja, Zaku. Side note, by the way, Keen is not in the databook, or at least I couldn't find her. So although Zaku is recorded the weakest Sound Ninja, it's only because Keen isn't in it. Anyways, Jirobo's stats are a 3 in ninjutsu, 4 in taijutsu, 1 in genjutsu, 2.5 in intelligence, interesting, 5 in strength, 2 in speed, 4 in stamina, and 2 in hand signs, making him, in theory, a Chunin level ninja. I would argue, however, that the databook score shouldn't really be the defining factor in determining skill level, mainly because characters with specific gimmicks will typically rank lower than their actual skill level. For example, Gaara never ranks above a 29.5, which is widely considered the threshold for Jonin level, but objectively, Gaara is a Kage level ninja by the start of Shippuden. So even though Jirobo's score says he's a mid-Chunin level, I think it's more fair to say he's a lower Chunin level. With stage 2 curse mark, I'd say he's a high mid-level Chunin to low high-level Chunin, if you can follow that sentence. That's my personal interpretation of his strength though. I think you can make an argument that he's a typical high-level Chunin with stage 2. Just definitely not Jonin, like, no way. Something you'll notice, and something I'll point out about all the Sound Ninja 5, is that they all have distinct weaknesses. So while most of them are relatively well-rounded, they all have some sort of weak spot. And I'm not just talking about their genjutsu, I mean one of the other base statistics. For Jirobo, his would easily be speed, although I would argue intelligence is another one given how he acts during his battle with Choji, something I'll mention when I get into their fight. Jirobo's abilities are pretty simple on the surface. He's got this big earth dome that we see in episode 112. It drains the chakra of the people inside it, and is honestly the most threatening jutsu if his opponent doesn't act fast enough. He's got a terracotta wall that looks similar to Kakashi's mud wall, except it isn't. He can also drain someone's chakra from his hand, something that was Yorui's specialty in the Chunin exams. And he also has a very specific type of taijutsu that utilizes mostly open palms and using his weight to his advantage. On paper, Jirobo's jutsu and overall abilities aren't as unique as the rest of the Sound Ninja, but that's actually because his jutsu are supposed to serve as our official introduction to Earth style. Because as weird as it sounds, it's the last of the 5 basic styles that we haven't truly seen. For water style, we have Zabuza with his water clones, water prison, and water dragon. Not to mention, we also saw some water style with Itachi. And we also saw Tobirama create a fucking tsunami. For fire style, we have Fireball Jutsu and Dragon Flame Jutsu. For lightning style, we have Chidori/Raikiri. And for wind style, we have Tamari and her fan. The only Earth-adjacent techniques we've seen were Gaara-san in the Chunin exams, Kakashi's Headhunter Jutsu in the Bell Test, and then Hiruzen's Goofy Mud Dragon and Hashirama's Wood style, all of which aren't really conventional Earth style, or at least similar to what we see in Shippuden. So Jirobo is basically just acting as our intro to Earth style, so any Earth style in Shippuden doesn't feel uncanny to us. His stage 1 curse mark doesn't have any real underlying themes behind it, but something to note is that it looks ugly as hell. His stage 2 curse mark, however, gives him a lot more than a power boost. It makes him no longer balding. His curse mark is actually like a really easy way to tell that he's the weakest, because while every other stage 2 curse mark will noticeably alter the user's appearance, for example Kidomaru and Tayuya, Jirobo's version of modification is just more hair and warts on his face. We only see Jirobo fight once, which is obviously the time he got absolutely worked by Choji. This fight is why I argue his intelligence should maybe be lower, because during this fight, he bullies Choji, which was objectively an emotional decision, because he was using Choji to project his own situation. That kinda ended up locking in Choji, and if Jirobo didn't do that, he might have actually won. Anyways, his fight with Choji is a very simple yet effective case of a tug-of-war type of battle. Choji takes the green pill and stops base Jirobo. Jirobo goes into stage 1 and beats Choji's ass. Choji takes the yellow pill and gains the upper hand. Jirobo goes into stage 2, picks up an expanded Choji with one hand and beats him again. Then Choji takes the red pill and just shits on him. I know that seems like a really simplified version of that fight, but that's pretty much what it is. Most of that fight is Choji flashback stuff, and this video isn't about Choji, so yeah. One of the main reasons Jirobo lost was that, like I mentioned, he bullied Choji and that locked him in. Without that, I seriously don't think he would have lost. If he just shut up and killed Choji when he was down, he would have made Choji have one of the saddest deaths in all of Naruto. But instead, he was a moron and his rage baiting went too far. The other reason he lost kind of pairs up with the last one. He was just way overconfident and underestimated Choji. Without this, he wouldn't have been rage baiting and he would have, again, killed Choji. I think Jirobo is easily the least interesting out of the Sound Ninja 5. His personality is just him being a chud. His abilities aren't super unique in a broad sense because he was pretty much just our introduction to Earth style. His curse mark doesn't stand out, and any hype surrounding his fight with Choji is cuz of Choji. And that's not saying he's a bad character, it's just that he's the most boring out of the Sound Ninja 5. Like, to the point where I think Dosu would have been a cooler addition, but that's also probably just my bias. Cause, as we know, Dosu's the GOAT. Okay, now we're at Kidomaru. Kidomaru's name means demon child, which can potentially refer to his way of handling opponents as he plays with them before killing them. Kidomaru is also a name in Japanese folklore, but this probably doesn't mean anything because the Kidomaru in the folklore was focused on avenging his father's death, which is something the Kidomaru from Naruto has nothing to do with. Kidomaru is from the East Gate, and his purpose is clearly to trap people and act as a long-range threat alongside Tayuya. I would argue his role in the group probably has a lot more to do with distraction though, given how relentless his attacks can be. You know, like, potentially he distracts them, then Tayuya gets them with Genjutsu, and then chud-ass Jirobo smacks them. It is headcanon, of course, but I see how that can theoretically be a coordinated attack they would have. According to the data books, Kidomaru has a 25 total score, making him tied for the strongest out of the Sound Ninja 5. He has a 4 in Ninjutsu, 2.5 in Taijutsu, a 1.5 in Genjutsu, 4 in Intelligence, 2 in Strength, 3 in Speed, 4 in Stamina, and 4 in Hand Signs. This plus what we see in the anime point to Kidomaru being a mid-level Chunin. And with stage 2 curse mark, he's most likely a high-level Chunin. His main weakness would be his actual strength, but given he's a long-range fighter, I don't think that's really a problem for him. I'd also argue that him playing with his opponents is also a weakness, given that, just like Jirobo, if he put his pride to the side, he would have most likely won. Kidomaru has a pretty wide array of jutsu, which is one of the reasons he's such a threat and why he has that 25 score. His first jutsu is a big-ass spider web that, you know, works like a spider web. He actually uses this twice, which might come off as a surprise. The first time was during Konoha Crush when Orochimaru was getting away, and the second time was when he trapped Naruto's clones during Sasuke Recovery Mission. He can also use smaller spiderwebs on individual enemies. He can use the string from these spiderwebs to create traps and track his enemies, something that we see when the Sasuke Recovery team is initially on their trail. His main offense and defense is this metal that he can secrete out of his skin like sweat. He can also make it to form certain things inside of him, which he pulls out of his mouth like a fucking freak. When he makes it come out of his skin, he uses it as a solid defense, while anything he pulls out of his mouth is used for offense. His offense includes these boomerang-looking things, kunai, and of course his bow and arrows. His arrows can either come in a normal form or have a spiral tip, and he also can attach a string to these arrows, manually controlling their trajectory. The last jutsu he has is a summoning, which is basically just a big-ass spider that makes a bunch of mini spiders. His jutsus are actually the only one out of the sound that have nothing to do with sound. Even Jirobo's technically do, as he uses rocks, which can be seen as a pun for rock, the genre. Kidomaru's jutsu, though, is just a spider, and the closest thing to that is the GOAT, Young Thug. So actually, never mind what I said, he passes with fucking flying colors. His stage 1 curse mark has some meaning if you look hard enough. It looks like vines, which has some correlation with the threads of spiderwebs in the sense that they typically are interconnected with other vines or threads. His stage 2 curse mark, however, doesn't have any meaning, as it makes him look like a spider which he has nothing to do with. Kidomaru's fight with Neji is pretty simple on the surface. He fires off some spiderwebs at Neji that work for a second, then don't, cause Neji can break spiderwebs with gentle fists. Neji hits him with 64 palms, but he survives. Then Kidomaru decides he should go into long distance, considering that's his strength. He goes into stage 1 and summons his splooge spider, which over time helps him uncover Neji's blind spot. The second he sees it, he exploits it and gets 6 good shots on Neji. Kidomaru then goes into stage 2 and gets out his bow. He tries to end it there, but he misses. Mainly because Neji had like a chakra force field that allowed him to see the arrow before it hit him. Neji then tries to run away, but Kidomaru fires another arrow attached to a string immediately at Neji. This allows him to control the arrow and make it always in Neji's blind spot, even if he's turning his head like crazy. Neji hides behind a tree, however, and the arrow just misses him. Kidomaru decides in this moment that he's now going to use a spiral-tipped arrow so it can just cut through trees and hit Neji immediately. In this moment, however, Neji notices that there was a spider thread attached to the arrow, something he can exploit. Kidomaru then fires the spiral-tip arrow, and instead of dodging it, Neji decides he's just going to let it impale him. As it hits Neji, Kidomaru thinks he won, he thinks he's so back, but in reality, it's never been so over. Neji funnels his gentle fist through the thread, and since the thread is in Kidomaru's mouth and in turn his stomach, it leads to him pretty much getting hit with gentle fists, but like, internally. This leads to Kidomaru's internal organs to be fucked. But just cause Neji is an S-tier hater, he decided he needed a 64 palms just for good measure. Which of course then led to Kidomaru, dying. Even though Kidomaru was pretty much in control for this entire fight, there actually is some glaring weaknesses. For starters, he got way too overconfident. If he let go of the thread the second it hit Neji, he would have won easily. The other reason he lost, however, is sort of his fault, but you can't really blame him. He had a crucial misunderstanding on what Gentle Fist was as a jutsu, more specifically the limits it could be taken to, cause he described it as like a little knife on Neji's fingertips that would slice his spiderwebs and would also leave devastating blows on opponents' chakra points, which is technically correct, but what he didn't account for is that Neji could alter its usage. Cause when he turned Kidomaru's organs into goop, he didn't use his chakra as a knife, but instead funneled it through the thread, pretty much just giving it another outlet, which in Kidomaru's defense took insane levels of control, but still, it was definitely something he could avoid. In the end though, he didn't, so Lil Bro got shit on by a side branch member. Yuck. Alright, next we're gonna do Sakon and Ukon, cause they technically died before Tayuya, even though in the anime they died in the same episode. Sakon's name means left, and now that you know that, I'll give you a second to guess what Ukon means. You got it? If you said right, you're a fucking moron. It means turmeric. Just kidding. Sakon and Ukon are from the West Gate, which is fitting considering that Sakon, the person whose name means left, is the main body controlling Sakon and Ukon. Their purpose is to be leader when Kidomaru isn't around, but other than that, it's a little hard to pinpoint. I imagine it's to be a second line of offense and main line of defense, just considering their taijutsu and summoning, but I think you can have a ton of different perspectives on their actual role. Sakon has a 25 score with a 4 in ninjutsu, 3 in taijutsu, 1 in genjutsu, 2.5 in intelligence, 3.5 in strength, 3 in speed, 4 in stamina, and 4 in hand signs, making him a mid-level chunin. Ukon on the other hand is a 24.5 with a 5 in ninjutsu, 3 in taijutsu, 1 in genjutsu, 3.5 in intelligence, 3 in strength, a 4 in speed, 2 in stamina, and 4 in hand signs, also making him a mid-level chunin. With the curse mark, I'd argue they could be a Jonin level just because of how powerful they seem, but I think it's more fair to say high-level chunin. These two by far are the most rounded. The only glaring weakness would be Ukon's stamina, which is essentially not an actual problem since they're connected most of the time. The only other weakness besides genjutsu would be Sakon's intelligence, maybe, but even then, that's literally in the middle, or average. Just off these stats alone, you can pretty much see why they're the leader of the Sound Ninja 5 when Kidomaru isn't around. Cause like, they're pretty much just a jack of all trades. They know ball. Their jutsu aren't that vast, but that's not to say they aren't super powerful. Their taijutsu is a technique they call do-re-mi, which is actually the start of a system of syllables that represents the 7 pitches of a major scale. It was shown when they were convincing Sasuke to go to the sound, and I'm not gonna lie, I would have mentioned it then if I knew what do-re-mi actually was. I actually only know what it is now because of that Chris Patrick song, so yeah. Sakon and Ukon's main ability is that they can kind of phase into people's bodies and essentially merge with their cells, slowly killing them in the process. When they're merging with each other though, it means they can heal faster, which isn't fun at all. The only other real jutsu they have besides this is Rashomon gates, which are pretty much just a wall no one can get through. It is worth noting though that during stage 2 curse mark, they will split apart, effectively making it a 2v1 if the person they're fighting doesn't have a puppet or a dog, which against a typical opponent would be very powerful. It was kind of just bad luck they didn't have normal opponents. Their stage 1 curse mark looks like camo, which points to their ability to silently infiltrate people's bodies and assassinate them. Stage 2 on the other hand makes them look like demons. showing that they're actually reincarnations of the demon brothers from the Land of Waves. Their fight with Kiba on the surface seems like a very simple portrayal of a villain's momentum just being flipped in a second. It originally starts with them, along with Kiba and Akamaru, falling down this big-ass ravine and somehow surviving. They immediately fight Kiba and are absolutely dog-walking this man, as they're already in stage 1 before they even fell into the ravine. They pretty quickly go into stage 2, but Kiba and Akamaru decide they're going for their two-headed wolf thing, so Akamaru ends up pissing on their head. And Wolf Fang over Fang actually ends up being so powerful it splits them in two. Fortunately for Sakon and Ukon though, that's kind of their stage 2's whole gimmick, so I guess good shit Kiba and Akamaru. They end up going for Fang over Fang again, and this is where Rashomon gates come in and just stop it immediately. Something to note about the fight up to this point is that they've always had an answer for something. So even when Kiba seems like he's gained some momentum, Sakon and Ukon just grab it back quickly. And that really helps show the viewer not only their strength but their dominance when fighting, which can help us kind of piece together why they're chosen as leader. Anyways, Akamaru pisses in Sakon's eyes and then Ukon infiltrates Kiba's body. Not knowing that Kiba's got fucking guts of steel though, cause Ukon actually ends up getting stabbed by a kunai through a wound Kiba inflicts on himself, effectively making him get out of Kiba's body and allowing Kiba to escape. Something so funny about this is that even though Ukon's got that 3.5 in intelligence, he genuinely gets so pissed here. Like, he stops caring. He pretty much is just dead set on killing Kiba because of this. Even if it's smart for him to fall back for a bit and heal himself, he doesn't care. He just gets to Sakon, goes in his body, and says, "Find him and let me know when you do, because I'm killing him." Like, Kiba actually rage baited him so hard just for thinking outside the box. Kiba runs away and tries to survive because, you know, he just stabbed himself, but eventually after like 3 episodes runtime, they find him. Because instead of just hunting him down normally, Ukon actually ended up using Kiba's jacket to mask his scent, so Kiba didn't know that he would be hunting him. At this point, Ukon is pretty much ready to kill Kiba, but unfortunately for him, Kankuro decides that's not happening. Quickly, Sakon catches up to them and tries to enter Kankuro's body, but unfortunately the Kankuro they thought they were fighting ended up being one of his puppets, which kind of leads to Sakon getting shit on here. This then forces Sakon to go in Ukon's body to heal, and Kankuro immediately goes after them. He ends up trapping both of them in his puppet because Ukon did one too many flips, and at this point they're pretty much boned. Kankuro decides they're gonna have the most gruesome death possible, so he uses his other puppet to impale them 6 times in the torso and then once in the head, just for the love of the game. I honestly don't think the loss here was Sakon and Ukon's fault. I think they kinda just got fucked, cause there's no way they could have foreseen Kankuro coming in and saving Kiba, and that's pretty much what led to their downfall. I will say though, just for jokes, that the reason they lost is cause Sakon deadass flipped into Kankuro's puppet, and instead of fighting his way out, he just told Kankuro to let him go, like that was ever gonna happen. Other than that though, they really didn't do anything wrong. Kankuro just kind of outplayed both of them, which now leads us into the last one, Tayuya, who in my opinion is the most interesting out of the Sound Ninja 5, with Kidomaru being closely behind. Tayuya's name is most likely based off the Sayaponia Tayuya plant, probably said it wrong. Phonetically, however, it can be split into Ta-yu-ya. Ta meaning reason, yu meaning frequent, and ya meaning classical. Put these 3 together and it means the reason for the classical frequency, or rather classical sound, which can further be interpreted as the reason the flute, aka the classical frequency, is playing. Tayuya is from the Northgate, which now allows me to get into this little detail about one of the covers. More specifically, chapter 205. In that cover, you can see the Sound Ninja 5 are standing in a diamond, which actually correlates to an upside down compass. Tayuya in the north, Kidomaru in the east, Jirobo in the south, and then Sakon and Ukon in the west. So even though the gates Kishimoto gave them were probably just random, it's cool that he still gave them a little nod in one of the covers. Tayuya also being from the opposite gate as Jirobo plays into how they interact with each other, as they have constant disagreements. Tayuya's purpose in the group is pretty simple. Her role is to use genjutsu on opponents, rendering them useless. Another possible role though is to use her summoning to tire out the enemy, something I'll talk about more when we get into her jutsu. In the data book, Tayuya has a 24.5 overall, with a 3 in ninjutsu, 2 in taijutsu, 5 in genjutsu, 3.5 in intelligence, 1 in strength, 3 in speed, 3 in stamina, and 4 in hand signs. This makes her a mid-level chunin, with her stage 2 curse mark making her a high-level chunin. Just like with Sakon and Ukon though, if you were pushing it, you maybe could say jonin, but I'm saying high-level chunin to be safe. Her obvious weaknesses are strength and taijutsu, but Tayuya is actually a perfect example of how these rankings should not really fully determine strength. Cause while she is tied for the second lowest score, making her tied for the second weakest, she realistically has above average skills in everything besides the things she doesn't need, those being taijutsu and strength. She doesn't really need strength given her genjutsu stops opponents from moving, allowing her to take a free, potentially fatal shot at her enemy. And for taijutsu, it's the same story. She doesn't need it because she uses genjutsu. She stops her opponents from using taijutsu anyways. This is the same reason I realistically wasn't really counting genjutsu for the other Sound Ninja 5 scores, because they're just not a part of their arsenal, so it's not really fair to call it a weakness. But with Tayuya, since she's the opposite as them, it's kind of a different story. You kind of need to factor in strength and taijutsu because they are essential. Tayuya is the only one of the Sound Ninja 5 besides Kidomaru that has a specialized tool for her abilities, as all of Tayuya's abilities come from her flute. But she also has one of the smallest arsenals as she more just specializes in the things she has. Her first jutsu is her summoning of 3 Doki, which she controls with her flute. They have 2 types of attacks, the first one just being a base attack, but it's still powerful enough to destroy whole tree branches. The second type of attack is where Tayuya will change the melody, and the Doki will then funnel out their spiritual energy. Tayuya then controls that part of the Doki, and it attacks the opponent's physical energy. It doesn't deal any physical damage, however, because again, it's just spiritual energy. I'm not going to go fully in depth of how this ability works, because in Overanalyzing Naruto, I do that, so if you want to watch that, link in description. Her other jutsu is obviously her genjutsu, where she plays a melody that disrupts the senses, more specifically the ears, and transplants her opponent into a world where they see their flesh melt and only see their bones. This makes them freak out and paralyzes them, allowing her to walk up to her opponent and easily kill them. The only way this jutsu doesn't work is if her opponent's name is Shikamaru. Tayuya's curse mark stage 1 doesn't have any real meaning, but if you try hard enough, it kinda looks like radio waves. Her stage 2, however, does actually connect to her name, as her name is based off, this plant, and the horns on her head kinda look like it. Tayuya is also one of the only characters who has a noticeable accident in her character design, as in episode 115, the animation team forgot to color in her eyelashes and instead they were green. This is the only episode it happened to, it has never happened again. The only thing that's close to this is Tamari's constantly changing eye color, but that's on purpose. This was entirely on accident. Tayuya's fight with Shikamaru is actually a really cool fight in terms of momentum, because it's just constantly shifting throughout it. It starts off with her using stage 1 curse mark and immediately summoning her Doki. After she summons them, she controls them in the first stage of their attack for a bit as they chase Shikamaru. She then makes them go into their spiritual energy form and they chase him even more. After that, Shikamaru studies them and ends up getting all the Doki in shadow possession. This forces her to dispel them, but unfortunately for her, not long after, Shikamaru gets her in shadow possession. She then goes into stage 2, and Shikamaru tries to use Shadow Strangle, but she ends up being able to get off her genjutsu with her flute, and Shikamaru's under it for a short period of time. When walking up to him with a kunai, however, Shikamaru reveals he broke out of it and punches her. He then tries to get her in Shadow Strangle again, but it leads to a stalemate. Something to note about this fight up to this point is that she pretty much would have beaten any other Leaf Ninja on the Sasuke recovery mission easily, but since her opponent was Shikamaru, someone who has a big fucking 5 head, she had a lot more trouble. Like, there were so many times she would have beat everyone else, but specifically at the genjutsu is when everyone would have been beat. So realistically, even though this fight sits at a 50-50, she would have beat anyone else. It was just that Shikamaru was doing so well. That's not to say she doesn't beat Shikamaru, however, because over time she wins this stalemate and is about to kill him, but Tamari comes in and saves him. Tayuya then retreats because she has a terrible matchup against Tamari, but Tamari decides she doesn't get to do that, so she summons her Weasel summoning and Tayuya fucking dies. The reason Tayuya lost is similar to the reason that Sakon and Ukon lost. It was kind of just bad luck. Tamari spawned in and decided to drop one of the craziest summonings in Naruto, and to be honest, she didn't even stand a chance. Like, look at this. I don't even think like 99% of the characters in Naruto are surviving that. The Sound Ninja 5 as a whole were honestly like the perfect villains to have in the Sasuke recovery mission. Like, they all oppose the people they fought really well. Jirobo and Choji are similar fighters, and everything Jirobo said to bully Choji kind of pertained to Choji's flashbacks. Kidomaru had webs that can only be broken with chakra and is a long-range fighter, while Neji's gentle fists and 64 palms involves chakra from his fingertips. Not to mention, he's a close-range fighter. Sakon and Ukon are a duo, and then of course Kiba and Akamaru are a duo. Then Tayuya's summoning uses a jutsu that looks like a ghost, and Shikamaru uses shadows, 2 things that are pretty adjacent to each other. Not to mention, Tayuya is hot-headed while Shikamaru is more calm. They're both long-range fighters that don't really have a strong close range. There's more to that, like duo specifically, but that's all I'll say in this video. Overall, I think they're one of the reasons the Sasuke recovery arc is so beloved, because they just come in, do their thing, and leave. Like, if they weren't so popular, Studio Pierrot probably wouldn't have put them in the war arc for filler, and Crunchyroll probably wouldn't have put that specific moment on their YouTube channel. That's why I thought it would be fun to overanalyze them as a group and individually in one set video. And like I've said, I've covered their canonical screen time in overanalyzing Naruto, so this is kind of the perfect time to do that. I'll probably do more videos like this in the future, whether it's on individual characters or groups like the Akatsuki or like Team 7, Team Asuma, stuff like that. If you want to support me more than just watching this video, you can become a member on Patreon. And yeah, actual overanalyzing Naruto continues next week.